What's up, everybody? Welcome back to this week's chapter. We're looking at movement and composition. Now, if you want your tattoos to hold a sense of purpose and belonging on the human body, then you have to take movement into consideration when you're building your compositions. Now, the human canvas, it's not your average, everyday, ordinary, boring blank canvas waiting for you to mark it up and give it some kind of life. It's already an inherent artwork in itself that's been created by something else. So unlike marking up a blank canvas with a painting or a drawing, we're not trying to give life to the human body. It already has a life force. Our job is to amplify this life force rather than to be in conflict with it. So we've acknowledged that this life force exists, and we want to learn how to channel it into our tattooing. We want our artwork to exist in cooperation with the already inherent energy of the human canvas. In this chapter, we're going to be looking at different types of visual movement over the planes of the human body, and I want to acknowledge that this surface movement, it is reflective of a deeper function, which is that the human body is made to move. It's made to move us around in three-dimensional space, take us from one location to another, and we have to recognize that the body is literally made to move. We want to take this energy of movement and start to duplicate it in our tattooing so that we create harmony between our work and the canvas that's wearing it. Now, this is the function of our tattooing, which is to act as a harmonious decoration that's amplifying an energy that's already there. All right, so I'm in Procreate here. I've got some arms up on the screen, and we're just going to start to draw on top of them to see if we can map out a little bit of the movement patterns that are going on. A nice way to break it down is to consider that movement transitions from a joint to another joint. So we've got the shoulder joint, the elbow joint, and the wrist joint here. And our movement's going to be some sort of motions that connect these things together, like this. The movement doesn't obviously look like this, but that's just the idea that you can keep in mind. So getting rid of this, let's see what we can come up with here. I'm going to start at the wrist, and I'm just going to imagine that it's like a snake snaking up around the arm. That kind of thing looks like it's making sense. Let's move on to our next piece here. I like to use these little spirally type things like this when I hit a joint, just to illustrate that there's a bit of different movement that might be going on there. So the wrist joint's got one, the elbow joint's got one, the shoulder joint's got one. And I'm actually maybe going to put one right on the elbow here too, or sorry, on the bicep, because it has this this nice circular bulge going on. And this is why we're using male arms right now, because typically male arms are a little bit more muscular and defined than females. So it's going to be a lot easier to see the movement that's actually going on. Get rid of this one up here. I don't think that this makes too much sense. Let's try. Something like that. Looks like it works pretty good. Let's move on to our next one. So there you have it. We've got movement going over the male arm in a variety of different ways. And all you can see is that I'm kind of building these movement patterns based on fluid curving lines and spirals. I like to use the spirals where there's a joint or maybe some sort of transition or a muscular bulge where I feel like it just looks a little bit different than the rest of the body. And the spirals, they add a nice little bit of interesting movement to what could otherwise just be as simple as like a snake falling down around the arm, wrapping around somebody's arm. So like I said, you can do this in a number of different ways. This is just whatever came to the top of my head when I was drawing this right now. But let's go ahead and let's look at some legs. So I've got my legs up here, and immediately I can see that there's this muscular bulge happening right there. So I'm thinking that this would be a good spot for a spiral. It seems to make sense to have that on there. And then from that, I'm just going to start drawing a bunch of different lines on here that are fluid and wrapping around the body in a nice manner. I'm going to do another spiral here on the back of the knee, imagining that my snake is moving up the leg, wrapping around. Look at that. There you have it. Movement over the back of the leg. See, it's not that complicated to figure out. You're just drawing some nice fluid lines moving in harmony with what you would guess to be the muscles' already existent movements. And there's your leg. So hopefully this is starting to make sense for you now. Let's continue on and let's look at another example here. And this is the front of the torso. Now, this is a little bit more complicated because we have a whole bunch of different directions that are going on. So we want to just break it down into more simple shapes. If I'm looking at this and I'm thinking, what are the most simple movement patterns that I see? This is what's going to come up. And there you have it. That's the front of the male torso. And again, we're using the male body type right now because it's generally just easier to see the musculature underneath. And the muscles really are going to be what define the form and the flow that you're going to incorporate into your tattoos. Now it's going to be the same thing on a body that's not as emphasized by their muscle groups, but this is just a generally speaking, this is a pretty safe format to go with, and you don't have to worry about how to include this in your designs right now because we're going to be looking at that in the next videos. One more example here, we've got the back. So the back it's going to be the most square canvas, the most flat and square canvas of pretty much any area on the human body. So you don't have to follow the form and the flow as religiously as you might on another area because it's not as obvious, it's not as pronounced on the back. But if you were to break this down into form and flow, here's what it would look like. You'd have something like this. It's very similar to the front of the body.
So as you can see on the back, it is pretty similar to the rest of the body.